City, New York City, Civil War, Civil War, Civil War, City, New York, the City, Civil War, the City, New York City, New York, New York City,
the Civil War, New York City, War, New York City's War, New York City, New York City, New York, New Yorkers and Civil War, City, New York City, New York, New York, New York, and City, New York City, New York City, New York City, New York, New York City, New Yorkers, New Yorkers, New Yorkers, New York, New York, New Yorkers, New York, the Civil, New York, New York City, New York City, New York, New Yorkers, New York City, New Yorkers, New York City, New York, the War, New York, New York City, New York, Civil War, New Yorkers, the War, New York City, New York City, the War, New York, the War, New York, War, the War, New Yorkers, the War, City, War, Civil War, the New York's New War, New York City, the War, New Yorkers, the New York, War, New York City, the War, New York City, New City, the War, the City, New York, the City of New York, New Yorkers, the City of New York, New York City, the City, the War, the City, New York City, War, New York, the City, New Yorkers, the War, New York City, the War, New York City, New York City, New York City, the Civil War, the War, New York City, New Yorkers, the Civil War, the New City, New York City, the City, New York City, the City, the War, the City.